Consider the value of a single sheet of paper. In a series of experiments, researchers at Harvard, Duke, and Tulane discovered that the act of folding that paper creates a specific, measurable distortion in how we perceive its worth. The researchers asked novice participants to follow instructions to fold simple origami figures, like frogs and cranes, resulting in amateurish, often lopsided creations. To measure the participants' true valuation, the team used the Becker-DeGroot-Marshak procedure. This incentive-compatible method requires participants to bid real money against a randomly drawn price to keep their work, forcing an honest assessment of value. To find a baseline, independent observers valued these amateur creations at an average of 5 cents. They valued expert origami much higher, averaging 27 cents. Finally, novice builders bid on their own creations, willing to pay 23 cents, nearly the expert market value. This 5x premium suggests that consumer labor creates a massive shift in perceived value. Researchers aim to isolate the specific variables that cause this valuation to skyrocket. Product designers typically rely on two standard hypotheses to explain why involving the consumer adds value. The first is customization. The theory suggests that value increases when a consumer can tailor a product to their own idiosyncratic preferences. The second is the endowment effect, the idea that mere ownership or extended physical contact with an object artificially inflates its perceived worth. Dan Ariely and his colleagues designed a sequence of studies to rigorously separate the effects of labor from those of customization and touch. They aimed to determine if pure labor alone could generate a premium, even when preference matching and physical endowment were stripped away. The researchers first addressed customization by testing a mundane, utilitarian product, the plain black IKEA storage box. Participants were assigned to either inspect a pre-assembled box or build one themselves. These boxes were standardized, offering no opportunity for personal expression or tailoring to individual taste. Even without customization, the builders were willing to pay 78 cents, compared to only 48 cents from those who didn't assemble the box. That is a 63% premium for the exact same object. This data suggests that the industry's reliance on complex customization toolkits may be overlooking a simpler driver of value. In this scenario, aesthetic and social display value was non-existent. A plain black box for private storage offers no opportunity to show off. Pure labor is mathematically sufficient to generate a significant price premium, shifting the focus of the investigation to the role of time and physical touch. To test the durability of labor-based value, the team used Lego sets, a medium designed to be assembled and taken apart. Participants were sorted into 3 groups: those who received a pre-built set, those who built a set, and those who built a set and then immediately took it apart. Crucially, the unbuilt group had the maximum amount of interaction and physical contact with the Legos. If the endowment effect drove value, the unbuilt group should have produced the highest bids. Instead, while the build group's valuation spiked, the unbuilt valuation collapsed to the pre-assembled baseline. The act of undoing the labor erased the psychological value, despite the fact that these participants spent the most time touching the product. This proves that physical touch and time spent are not the engines of the IKEA effect. The labor must remain intact to retain its value. In a final experiment, researchers tested if completion was the necessary trigger for this value spike. They stopped some participants 2 steps short of finishing an IKEA box. The valuation dropped severely. Builders who finished their box bid an average of $1.46, while those forced to stop early bid only 59 cents. The team also tracked participants' self-reported do-it-yourself identities to see if this effect was limited to hobbyists. This graph maps willingness to pay against completion and DIY identity, revealing a consistent vertical gap between builders and incomplete builders. Because the lines remain parallel, the completion premium is independent of personality, applying to enthusiasts and novices alike. Incomplete labor yields no premium. The shift in perceived value is strictly gated by the successful conclusion of the task. These findings point to a specific psychological mechanism, affectance. Affectance is defined as the human drive to successfully produce desired outcomes and assert tangible control over one's environment. Effort without completion fails to trigger this reward. Instead, as the Lego and incomplete box studies show, uncompleted work remains of demotivating cost. The data suggests a new framework for value. Labor, when paired with successful completion, leads to affectance, which the consumer translates into increased valuation. If the completion variable is removed, the willingness to pay reverts to the baseline market price of the object. The IKEA effect operates by engineering environments where users successfully demonstrate their own competence. This mechanic explains why instant cake mixes initially failed in the 1950s. They were designed to minimize labor, but in doing so, they made the baker's skill feel undervalued. Manufacturers corrected this by requiring the consumer to add a fresh egg, intentionally infusing the process with mandatory labor to make the final product feel earned. For modern product and system designers, the challenge is one of calibration. A system must introduce enough friction to require real effort, but be constrained enough to guarantee that the user reaches the finish line. Standardized, completable effort generates the 5x premium seen in the lab, while impossible friction or unwinnable tasks return valuation to the baseline.